Hey everyone, it's Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. It's Market Update, but Market Update Plus, because we're going to bring you all the latest news. I promise you a rant and an incredibly exciting tool.
Yes, welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for this important episode, so critical as an investor to be on top of what's going on in the news. So this is the episode once a month where we make it really easy for you to do that by bringing it all together in one place. Of course, for specific guidance about how this affects you, you can turn to Ask Rob and Rob, our episode on Tuesdays, and send us a question at propertyhub.net/ask, or you can write into our Sunday Times column, where this Sunday we're going to be advising a landlord who is so spooked by the Renters Reform Bill, which we have news on in a minute, that they want to get out completely. So you can check that out by picking up the Sunday Times or online if you're a subscriber. So let's get straight into this month's update, because there's loads going on, especially in the realms of politics, as I've said, lots to cover there. But let's start, as we always do, with house prices. Well, after we recorded last month's update, Halifax figures for August came out showing a drop. Halifax figures for September have not yet come out, but Nationwide's have, and they showed house prices as being flat throughout September, which puts the 12-month decline for Nationwide at 5.4% and Halifax at 4.6%. So we're around about 5% off the peak. That's being spun in the headlines as the biggest fall for 14 years or whatever, which is true, but also completely unsurprising because there haven't really been any falls in that time. So not particularly exciting in itself. What everyone wants to know, Rob, is what's going to happen from here? Would you care to venture a guess live on air?
No, I wouldn't, because I've definitely got this year wrong in terms of what I thought would happen. But you know what is interesting to me, Rob, is actually the lack of interest in property prices at the moment. It seems that people have got used to property prices being a bit softer, which they have been, haven't moved in the last month. But overall, over the last 12 months, we've seen that 5% dip on average. But people are used to it. And interest rates holding was a positive sign. And I think if that continues, that will give people confidence. We will see. Although what transaction data does show us is while nobody's particularly panicking, not many people are buying either. It's a very, very sedate market. There's not a lot going on right now. And that moves us nicely into our mortgage news. And the first news story we've got here is the Bank of England reporting that the mortgage approvals are at the lowest level for 6 months. So the amount of mortgage approvals has recently fallen again, which I'm slightly surprised by, although this was before the changes in interest rates, and we have some news on what is happening with products coming up in a moment. So this further backs up what we're seeing, that there's just not a lot happening. Interestingly, though, it's not just new mortgages that numbers are down on, it's actually remortgages as well. And it seems that people are just waiting to see at the moment before remortgaging on what to do. I mean, if the direction of travel around interest rates looking a little more positive at the moment, maybe that is a smart move. But Rob, while we've had that uncertainty over the last however many months, bringing some certainty back to the market with interest rates and that hold that we had in the last month has meant that lenders have also got a bit more confident. So lenders now are being more competitive with the products that they're offering. And there's some interesting products coming out.
Yeah, tons of stories around rates being cut. We could have picked out 10 different stories, but a kind of umbrella one from yourmoney.com talks about a mortgage price war and highlights the Mortgage Works making some major cuts. That is a very important buy-to-let lender. As have Barclays, Virgin Money, Yorkshire Building Society. Loads of price cuts, largely because the anticipation of where the peak in rates is going to be has come down significantly in the light of the base rate being held in the last month. So put that together with what we've just been saying about the market being slow but not that exciting, it seems like that's supportive of a silent property crash scenario. We'll link to our YouTube video about that. This is where basically house prices continue to be soft but unexciting. No one's really forced to sell. Mortgage conditions gradually improve. But by the time the market picks up again, inflation means that house prices have effectively corrected in real terms and can then kick on again. What would stop that playing out would be conditions that force people to sell, and that would push prices downwards. And that would basically be recession, job losses, or potentially another spike upwards in rates. We've seen 2 major spikes in the last 12 months, which has thrown the market into a bit of a panic. It doesn't look like there's going to be another one of those on the horizon, but if the last 12 months have taught us anything, is that you should not speak in definitive terms about these things. And we'll update on mortgages again in November, because it'll be really interesting to see where rates go from here.
Property Hub Select is brand new, but we are loving the feedback that we're getting already. Join us for in-person exclusive events, online masterclasses, and so much more. If you want to join Property Hub Select, then all you have to do is become a client of one of our services, and they are great services. So go to propertyhub.net/select to find out more.
Let's move on to talking about rents, because Rob, you've pulled out a story from the BBC that shockingly seems to indicate that rent controls might not work.
You may have heard our scepticism on rent caps in Scotland and how ineffective it actually is. But here is a real-life example on the BBC website. Because of a loophole, there's two tenants in an apartment. One of them has left, so the landlord is able to argue that this is a new tenancy. And the landlord now, instead of increasing it by the cap of 3%, is increasing it by 35%. And the reason why they can justify the 35% is because that's what the market rate is right now for that particular property. It's obviously been let for a while, and the landlord now has gone back up to market rate. This puts this poor lady in a terrible situation that she can no longer live in this area because all rents have gone up. It's very simple to see why this would happen. New landlords are going to be put off from buying buy-to-lets in Scotland, when over the border you simply don't have to contend with this. So there's less landlords in the market. Some landlords have decided to sell up. The tenants are staying put because they're scared of moving, because when they move, rents are going to be much, much higher, because the cap is for existing tenants. When there's a new property come to market, it's at market rate, and market rate is racing ahead because there's a lack of supply for all the reasons I've just mentioned. So the cap has basically been disastrous, because while it's meant to be capping rents at 3%, over the last year in Scotland, rents have increased by 6% because new tenancies aren't impacted. And across the UK, the average is only 5.5%. So the area with the cap is higher than the rest of the UK. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But yet we have this cap, which I suppose as a headline seems like a vote winner, but it's actually making things worse for people who rent in Scotland. It's making things worse for landlords because they're reluctant to do business in this area. It seems like a lose-lose situation. Yet it seems like the rental cap is here to stay, at least for the time being, in Scotland.
I'm going to say my favourite line from this article is, the landlord's justification for the increase is that the new price is simply the market rate for the flat. And they appear to be correct. Whoa, what a shocking loophole. Landlord in charging market rate shocker. I don't know what they want to happen. If existing tenancies are held below market rate forever, that doesn't help either. It doesn't solve the lack of supply problem. It does the opposite, like you've just said. It's just bizarre.
Now, the good thing is, Rob, is that because this looks so bad, and anybody who just glances at the numbers can see that, it doesn't take hours and hours of research. You'd like to think in the rest of the UK, they won't touch this with a barge pole. However, I've seen a lot of stupid things happen with politics and politicians over the years, and some very recently. In fact, let's cover some of them off now, Rob. If you'd like, I can get onto my HS2 rant.
Oh, please go ahead. Do not let me hold you back from an HS2 rant.
Why would you want a full railway when you can have half of one, but still spend billions and billions? And even to just make sure it feels extra special, your decision that you spend a few billion on the second section that you don't even do. Absolutely ludicrous.
The way that I'd improve on this is I would take the bit that's actually kind of the best bit and make it fractionally better, rather than doing anything to the bit that's stuck in the 70s. That'd be my approach.
Yeah, because we were all crying out for a slightly faster link between Birmingham and London. That's what we all wanted. It wasn't halving the journey times between Manchester and London and the rest of the north and London. No, just shaving off a few minutes between Birmingham and London is what we wanted all those billions spent on. Absolutely ludicrous decision. I know not everybody agrees with HS2, and that's okay. But when you are so far down the line, and no, the pun's not intended, I am cross. When you are so committed to this, it's like going nearly all in with all your chips in poker, having a couple of chips left and then folding. I mean, what is the point? You've committed, you're committed to this project. You've spent billions and billions and billions. The most transformative part is the second part, and then you don't do it. I ask everybody, and I'm not pro any party when it comes to politics, but I ask everybody listening to this, what on earth has this government achieved in terms of infrastructure in the last 10 years that they can take credit for? And Crossrail is not one of them, because that was started not in the last 10 years. What have they achieved? I can't think of anything. I can think of what they've messed up or not delivered, but what has happened? Absolutely nothing. The one chance to get something delivered that would make a meaningful difference, that the UK could be proud of, some incredible modern infrastructure that will make a difference to a lot of people in this country, has been pulled away. It makes me so cross. And it's not because it's going to hurt property prices. It won't. It's not about that. It's about this country doing ambitious things. And once again, we step back from the ambitious stuff. We step back from the stuff that'll make a difference. And we just act like a mediocre country. The thing is, when you act that way for long enough, that's what you become.
Well, I think we need to take this episode down a few notches. So let's talk about damp and mould.
Oh, don't get me started on that, Rob.
I didn't have to arm wrestle you particularly hard to be allowed to talk about this story, so I don't think I have to risk a major rant from you on this one. But this is actually a story that is probably going to provoke a similar reaction in certain listeners, because especially people who self-manage, and letting agents in particular. Damp and mould is a very contentious issue because, of course, there can be defects in the building itself that cause it, and they can have extremely serious health impacts. But there can also be absolutely nothing wrong with a property, and because the occupants won't open any windows or feel like they can't heat the property properly, it happens anyway, and there's nothing much you as the owner can do about it. And this leaves letting agents in particular stuck in the middle. The reason I bring this up now is the government has brought out new guidance on understanding and addressing the health risks of damp and mould in the home, which basically puts all responsibility on the property owner. We'll link to it in the show notes because it's a very long piece of guidance, but it provides an absolutely gigantic list of things that housing providers are supposed to do to prevent or treat damp and mould, some of which are pretty major. And the only line in there that makes any allowance for how the property is actually used is talking about tenants making small, reasonable adjustments to their behaviour if appropriate. So there'll be lots of landlords who are upset about this new guidance, but it is important to understand if you are letting out properties yourself or if you are an agent. So we'll link to it in the show notes.
A few quick updates for you. We mentioned on a previous podcast, but in case you missed it, EPC rules are going to be scrapped. So there was a lot of worry in the landlord community around EPC targets that were being set for a future date. That is not happening now. Will it be replaced by something else? We will see. That piece of proposed legislation is not coming through. So a victory for common sense there. And the renters reform bill is continuing. It seems like this is a story that's been going on for years. Well, probably because it has. It's continuing to push through. We will, of course, keep you updated on that because that's a massive story. But if you want to bring yourself up to speed on what that is, then make sure you check out Rob D's video on that subject. It's on YouTube. If you search through our channel, Property Hub UK, you'll find it. But we'll also link to it in the show notes.
Let's finish, Rob, with an international story that may eventually have an impact over here. This is New York City, which has effectively banned Airbnb and short-term lets. So, of course, New York, tourist hotspot, massive demand for accommodation, expensive hotels. Therefore, Airbnb has proliferated. It's one of their biggest cities. And hotels don't like this very much. They've lobbied against it from the start. But residents don't necessarily like it either because it takes supply out of the long-term rental market. So New York has done various things in the past, but it's now taken major action. And now for stays of less than 30 days, you can only do it if you're effectively renting out a room in your house. So you, the owner, need to be physically living there at the same time as your guests, and the maximum number of guests is 2. So given that the vast majority of Airbnbs are rented out as entire properties, this is a de facto ban. So this is an issue in New York, but the core challenge is the same in London, and it's the same in many other tourist hotspots across the country. So we've talked in the past, Rob, about how we expect to see more legislation and restrictions around holiday lets. This is probably the extreme version that we're seeing here. So I think this will be a very interesting one to keep an eye on, and I'm sure other city governments will be watching this to see how it plays out. Because if it goes well, or it's seen to go well, we could see the same happening elsewhere.
This is certainly one to watch. New York, after all, is not some two-bit city. It's a city of importance. And like you said, Rob, we will be watching this. And so will other governments and cities around the world. So we'll keep you posted if this has started to be adopted elsewhere or versions of it. A way to keep up to date, besides the market updates, of course, is Property Pulse. So make sure you subscribe to Property Pulse. It's our weekly newsletter. It's absolutely free. Rob D writes it personally himself, wow. So make sure you take advantage of that. Go to propertyhub.net/pulse. That's propertyhub.net/pulse. Sign up. You get 1 email a week with all the latest goings on. It's a must do.
Okay, so just before we wrap up this week, time for Hub Extra, that part of the show where we bring you an AI tool and occasionally something else. But no, this week it's another AI tool. What have you got for us, Rob?
I'm clearly tapping into all the emotions this week, Rob, because while I was clearly cross earlier, I'm super excited about this week's Hub Extra. It's ChatGPT, bear with me, that reads images. So ChatGPT, hopefully you've used by now. We've talked about it a bit on the podcast. It's an AI tool. There are lots of them, but that's the main one. If you don't know what it is yet, a quick YouTube search will send you in the right direction. But for the majority of listeners who do know what ChatGPT is, you may not know that it can now read images. And I've got the Pro account, which you have to pay for, which means that you get the features released to you first. So everyone will get this in the near future, but I've been able to play with it now. And what you can do is take a photo of something, because you can have the app on your phone as well, and ask it questions about that photo. That in itself doesn't sound that exciting, but what you can do is just phenomenal. So I had family around at the weekend, and I was taking pictures of crosswords and just giving it the prompt, solve this. So I've not told it what it is. I've just taken a photo of a crossword and said, solve this. And watching it solve it in front of your eyes is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Now, before I got access to this, I'd seen YouTube videos on what it could do. And you may be listening to this going, oh, yeah, sure. But when you get access to it, I really want you to use it and try it, because when you see it, it will amaze you and others around you. It is incredible. And then you start to think, what else could I use this for? So I started to put through some medical documentation and asking it to analyze that. I took a photo of a dish that had been made and took a picture of it and went, how can I make this? It recognized the dish, gave me all the ingredients I would possibly want for that dish, and then gave me the instructions on how to cook it. It is incredible. The thing with ChatGPT is the limitation seems to be you, the human, on your imagination and how you can use it. Once you start playing around with this, you're going to be able to do so many interesting things. And this is not probably a subject for the podcast because it's so visual. So in the near future, Rob, I insist that you get ChatGPT out and start playing around with this feature and how it could impact property investors, because the amount of use cases that you can use with this new feature is absolutely brilliant. As you can tell, Rob, and I'm glad we're ending on this, so I'm going away happy and on a high. I'm really, really excited about it.
It is nuts. I am now keen to wrap the episode so I can go and play with it myself, because I haven't had a chance yet. But you are completely right. It's you as the user that's the limitation now. And there's going to be such a major competitive advantage, such an upgrade you can give your life by not just staying on top of what's possible, but also like really thinking about how you can put this to creative uses. It's incredible stuff. But that is us done for this week. I hope you enjoyed this month's market update. You can catch us, of course, in the Sunday Times on Sunday, then with Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday, and the main event will be back next Thursday with a property podcast. So we look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.